Welcome to episode 9 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Jessica Rose Johnson. Hey, Jess.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Been recovering from COVID. So
oh no.
I've lucked out, and I'm blessed and glad to be here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for recovering. But also, well done for recovering, because it doesn't sound good by having it. So I'm partly nervous, to be honest, because this is a big episode for the show, for me, and I'm going to share why. So you are my first remote recording. How cool is that?
Exciting.
So I've had to use some different technologies and different software, so hopefully it goes fine. But also you're the first woman on the show.
I can dig that.
You can dig that. Okay, cool. But also that you're also the first how do I pronounce it? First non-UK forces personnel, and also the first US forces personnel. So this is really, really exciting.
Well, glad to represent. The pressure's on.
So I'm sure as we get into it, I'll feel less stressed and less nervous. But this is going to be really, really cool. So as previous episodes have been evolving, we have kind of like divulged into 4 questions to give a summary of what we're going to cover and what we're going to go into. So I'm still going to look at my iPad just to make sure I get the questions right. And I'm going to read those out. And if you could share, and then we'll dive into it. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Perfect. Okay, so the 4 questions are, when did you join the military? What service and branch did you join? How long did you serve for? And what rank did you get to?
All right. So I served 2007 to 2011. I was in the United States Marine Corps. I was stationed at MCAS Miramar, and I was in MAG 11, MALS 11 Squadron. I served for 4.5 years. And what was the other question?
The last one was the rank.
Oh, rank. Right. So I was a E4, which is a corporal. So I was the 4th enlisted rank.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and allowing me to read the questions. One day I'll get them off the top of my head. But so let's dive in. Let's start from the beginning. Where was you born and where did you grow up?
So I was actually born and raised here in Oklahoma. I say here because I'm here in Oklahoma still. Both my parents were Air Force, and they were active duty. I was that military kid that always wanted to move, yet my dad was stationed in Saudi Arabia practically my whole life, so we never moved. My parents still live in the same house when I was a kid, so I'm that very rare but unique military brat.
Okay. How did you find it as a kid being, as you put it, a military brat? We call that in the UK the same, actually. How did you find that?
It was just life. I didn't really think anything other than that. I had a few friends that were also military brats. And I said, since both my parents were active duty, that was a unique experience I've come to learn as being an adult and hearing other people's stories. But for me, that was just life. My dad would deploy, he'd be in and out, and my mom would just be working hard. And we had a really awesome babysitter.
Nice. And what was the school you went to? Was it a military school or was that normal?
No, we did not. My parents had originally, when they moved to Oklahoma, so they were stationed in Mildenhall, actually, in England. And when they moved to the U.S., Oklahoma was the only place they could get stationed together. And my oldest brother did go to school on base, but they decided that's just not what they wanted to do anymore. So I was a 13-year senior. I went to kindergarten through my senior year at the same school, and I never had to experience military school. I say had as if that was like a bad thing or something.
I've heard good things about military schools, but you just grew up in the same area with the same friends. Was that normal kind of kid life?
I'd say that. I also like to joke I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, ironically.
Okay.
No one now will ever believe that. But for the most part, yeah, it was same kids, same school. Again, I always wanted to move, and maybe that was the reason. 'Cause I'm like, I just want to move, find another better population of people to be around.
Yeah. So as a kid, when your dad would kind of go away, did you know what he was doing?
Not really. I had like an idea of it. My dad was in AWACS, so I got to tour a lot of the planes, and I got to go to his office here stateside a few times. So I kind of knew what he did. But obviously, being that young, I never really had an idea of what deployment really meant. As I got older, I started to understand more like, oh, wow, he's living in Saudi Arabia, working.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely something like I said, the older I get, the more I understand.
Yeah.
But as a kid, it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, my dad's working.
And so after kind of school, did you work or did you decide to join the military straight after school?
So I worked while in high school and I went to college, and I knew that there was no way I could just go straight into college. I was too bored. I wasn't challenged. And I always knew I wanted to serve. I have a long line of military service. My great grandpa was a World War II Navy veteran. My
Nice.
my grandpa was a World War II Navy veteran. My great grandpa was also in the Navy, but my parents were both Air Force. So I always knew I wanted to serve my time and be able to give back to my country. And my junior year of high school, that's when you can enlist here in America. I joined the Marine Corps. Now, the Marine Corps, you can't go to boot camp until after you've graduated. The Army, especially if you're like doing a Guard of Reserves, you can actually go to basic training in between your junior and senior year. So I left for boot camp 2 weeks after I graduated high school. It was actually the day after my brother's wedding. So I
Okay.
waited to get through his wedding, and then I went to boot camp right out of high school.
How did you find that?
Um, it was, I would do it all over again. I know I'm that crazy person that not a lot of people would say that, but it was honestly when I'm at my lowest in my life, or I think of the struggle of something, right? Where like, oh, something's really hard. I think back to that time, and I think back to how like, oh, I've overcome so much. And there's one particular incident when I was in boot camp where I had a fever. I had like a 103, 104 fever. And my drill instructor was trying to sneak me meds out in the woods so I wouldn't get dropped. And I was just trying to make it through, make it through. And I remember we had our night obstacle course. So you had a low crawl and climb fences and go through barbed wire and jump walls, like this big obstacle course thing. And my loving partner, I was in the tunnel first. So I try and try and try and go. And then she'd push me, and then she'd crawl and then push me. And she helped throw me over one wall. And as we're going through Constantine wire, all the barbed wire mix up, she had got me pushed through, and then she had got stuck. And actually, the barbed wire had cut her cheek.
Oh no.
And I remember, like, with all the everything I had in me, pulling her out and then taking a couple steps and blacking out.
Oh no.
So the next thing I remember is I'm over her shoulder and she's carrying me over this bridge. But I remember a time like that, and I think like I can get through anything. I got through that. I can get through anything. So
Mm.
I always tell people that boot camp will push you in whatever way you need to be pushed, whether it be mentally, whether it be physically, whether it be spiritually. Like, you will be pushed, and it really grows you as a person. So I'm very thankful for that experience and opportunity, and I would definitely do it all over again.
Okay.
So,
So And I'm just going to pre-warn you, during this kind of recording, I may, being a silly Brit, ask some silly questions. So apologies to any Americans listening that they're like, well, why doesn't he know that? So boot camp for you guys, is that what you do just before you actually join up, like to see if you can kind of hack it, or is that the like initial training phase?
So that is the initial training phase. So you like kind of pre-test the waters is we call it like the pool. So you go in and you go through maps where you do your physical, all of your evaluation stuff, and you kind of pledge saying like, hey, I intend to join. Right. And then I was in the pool, as the Marine Corps calls it. I was in the pool for an entire year, which is the most you can do. But I signed up like right as I turned 17. And we did monthly functions. So like once a month you got together and you would work on your physical fitness test. Sometimes you would do fun stuff like we'd play tag football or just different things like that. You'd work on your knowledge, as we call it. So what are the leadership traits? What are your general orders? What is your rank structure? Like those kind of things. So it kind of helps prep you before you go in. But there have been people who have signed up and been put in the pool and never officially gone to any training and never joined the military. But that's kind of like your prep course almost, where you can sign up and kind of test the waters before you officially put your feet on the yellow footprints, as we call it.
Got it. And so is that just for the Marines, or is that like all of the services in one big pool?
So I know all the services have their own thing. I don't know if they're all called pools or not.
Okay.
I know the Marine Corps for sure, we call it the pool, but other services, you can do the same thing. It's kind of like sign up saying, hey, I intend to go. And then you officially leave. Now, that is something that verbiage and language is different because we have our 4 main branches of service. In the Marine Corps, you go to boot camp, and it's 3 months long. We actually have the longest boot camp, and that's just your initial training. From there, how the Marine Corps is structured, right, is you are a rifleman first. So that is your key job. So if you have another job other than being a rifleman, you do an extra month of training, and that's our Marine combat training, where we get to do cool stuff like fire a saw, throw a grenade, go on ridiculously long hikes in the pouring down rain, things like that. And then from there, you go on to your job school, which we call our MOS school. There's other branches that they call it basic training, and they do like a small initial training, and the key focus is your job school, your job training from there. So that's where the branches differ a little bit, if it's boot camp versus basic training, and the structures are a little different in how long you go through that boot camp or basic training phase.
Right. Now you mentioned, did you say MOS?
Yes.
What does that stand for?
Military occupational specialty. So basically what your job is. So everyone is assigned a job, a role, and that role is numbered and titled. So like I was an 0121, I was an administrative clerk. So people want to be really fancy. They're like, oh, what was your job? Oh, I was an 0121, as if anyone actually really knows what any of those numbers mean. And honestly, if you're listening to this and you're that person that says, oh, I'm a 0853, like I have no clue what that is. Like, thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the number assigned to whatever your job is. So I was an 0121, which is an administrative clerk. So if people ask me, what was your job? I'm like, I was admin, rather than throwing out some number that you're going to have to Google.
Yeah. I'd never heard of that before. So that's really interesting to learn. As
the
far
Navy
as I'm aware,
gets trickier because the Navy, you have your rank structure. Like you can be a petty officer, but then you don't call them a petty officer because you call them by what their job is. So instead of being like a petty officer 3rd class, it's like a GM3. So GM is for gunner's mate. So it gets even more confusing if you're looking at Navy, because they call themselves by what their job is as part of their rank.
So within the training aspect of, you said Rifleman, how did you find that? Was it really fun? Was it difficult? Was it a mix of that?
It was actually really natural for me. So, since both my parents were military and my dad was very adamant that I be independent, take care of myself, and never get married, right? Um, I learned to shoot when I was 6 years old. So, I'll never forget the first time I ever shot a firearm. They usually joke, though, in the Marine Corps that if you come in already knowing to shoot, that means they're going to have to fix all of your problems.
Oh,
And that people who have never shot before are easier because they teach you their one way. But no, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And we shoot M16s. So
uh-huh.
I have like a side note, funny story. One time I was super, super nervous and I was talking to an astronaut at a banquet dinner and I was so excited to talk to this guy. I just thought he was so cool. And when he asked me what I fired in the Marine Corps, I said an AK. And I was like, what just came out of my mouth? I thought this guy is going to be like, this chick's a fraud. She was totally not in the Marine Corps. So for some reason, I felt the need to say, we shot M16s in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes that pressure, when you meet someone that
Yeah.
you might idolize or look up to, then sure, you say silly things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So here's a question.
Mm.
So when you guys finish training, so kind of, we call it basic training. We have all of our family come down and we do what's called a pass-off parade, where we all march onto the square and show off what we learned. Do you guys have anything like that over in the States?
We do. We do. So we have a family day in the Marine Corps. It's kind of broken up into a few different days. You have your family day. You actually do a big run. So, you get to call your cadence and you look really sweaty and really fit. And yeah, you run and cheer. So it's kind of like a whole day of activities. And then you do the marching. So we actually go on the parade deck and we march and our families can see how sharp and great we look. And then we
Yeah.
break and get to actually spend time with our family that day for a few hours. And we can kind of show them around the base, like, yeah, this is where we did this and this is where we did that. And from there, then the next day you actually graduate and you have your graduation ceremony.
Ah,
I've been I've had a weird luck in every single one of my graduations. So, high school, boot camp, my master's degree, pouring down rain.
really?
So, we typically would go back on the parade deck and march and have all the platoons standing out there. But because it was pouring down rain, they had to divide all of us up. And we squeezed into, I think it was a chapel. I'm trying to quite remember. We squeezed into this little chapel and we're all kind of wet and just standing there. And everyone's like, we can't really do anything. Let's just get this over with and just release, go with your families, get your stuff, and then head on to your next adventure.
That sounds challenging. And again, I'm just gonna be that silly Brit. So when you're in your training aspect, do you guys actually run around in a little group and do press ups and stuff with the 1, 2, 3, 4, I love the Marine Corps, that kind of stuff?
Actually, that's exactly, yeah. Or we do this is what you ask for when you're counting. So we call it the Marine Corps count is like every push-up is actually, it's more than one because you're 1, 2, 3, 4 is one. So
Okay.
then it's 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. But yeah, when we're in boot camp, and again, like this is a Marine Corps experience, every branch is a little different. So you're there for 3 months. There, at least when I went, I don't know, maybe it is different now, but there's no cell phones. You actually write letters, and you are there from doing stuff from morning to night. So you wake up early, you go PT, and sometimes it's just like a stupid long run that you're like, why would I ever have to run this far ever in my entire life? Kind of
Yeah,
run.
yeah.
And then we did tons of obstacle courses. So one of them was pretty fun. We have reflector belts. We call them glow belts.
Yeah.
You put it, you start and you have it around your waist, and you got to run a lap, and then you got to do like 50 crunches, and then you move your reflector belt across you going this way, and then you got to do like 50 push-ups after you run a lap, and then you move the reflector going the other way, and then you got to run another lap, and then you got to do like 100 jumping jacks. Or so those were a lot of the type things that we got to wake up to in the morning.
Sounds good. Well, at least I know it's not just in the movies. It's actually real and legit.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of movies that have it pretty spot on.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I know our Marines do an awful lot of press ups. So kind of in the army, if you did something wrong, you might drop and give them 20. But I know that the Marines over here in the UK, they drop and give them 50 at least. So yeah, you guys are definitely above the standard of Army for sure.
Well, we have two different training bases for Marines. So in the United States, if you live east of the Mississippi River, you go to Parris Island, which is the original training depot of the Marine Corps. And then when the Marine Corps got really, really big, they opened up the training depot in San Diego, California. So if you're west of the Mississippi, you go there. But that's for guys only, because the Marine Corps is the smallest branch, and women are a very small group of people in the service. It's even smaller in the Marine Corps. So all women go to Parris Island. We have our own training battalion and everything. And with that difference is in Parris Island, there's a joke. So we have the sand pit where there's sand fleas. Oh. So if you get in trouble, your platoon has to go down into the sand pit, and you have to do like the push right now, jump right now, crunch right now, all that kind of stuff. And then on the West Coast, there's a huge joke is that they're called Hollywood Marines because they're in California, but they have mountains. So while in Parris Island, you're on an island, you're dealing with alligators or crocodiles, I never know the difference, and sand fleas. If you're in California, you're dealing with all the hills and the mountains. So, get used to getting bit by fleas or have to run up and down a mountain. I don't know. I'll just say I'm glad to be a Parris Island Marine. And I think it's one of those, the grass is greener on the other side. So I'm completely okay with that.
So where is Parris Island?
Oh, Parris Island is in South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay. See, my geography of America is still not awesome. So, yeah. I'll look that up later. So you complete all of your training, and then you head to your first. Is it camp? I mean, what do you guys call your first unit? That's what we call it.
We just refer to them as duty stations. So I did boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina, and then my MCT school, the one where we got to throw the grenade and all that, was near Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And then my job school, so my MOS school, actually happened to be in North Carolina as well. So I stayed on the East Coast for all of my training. And then once I got done there, I actually got stationed in San Diego. So that was my first duty station, was MCS Miramar.
Okay. Could you say that again slower for us Brits?
Oh, it's MCAS Miramar. So it stands for Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. And that's in San Diego, California. Okay.
So that's sunny, right?
Say what?
Is that sunny? Sunny.
Oh, yes. Sunny San Diego. I absolutely loved it. Was super blessed. Very thankful I did not have to stay on the East Coast. I had a lot of time there, and I needed me some sun and some beach time.
Well, I've got family up in Connecticut, so I kind of know what that different times of year feels like.
Yes.
And then my mum's living in Minnesota, so dead center top, and therefore gets really cold and gets really hot. And then California, I've toured it with my little road trips, so I know how sunny it is. But yeah, being stationed there, what was it like kind of getting there, being your first place? Was you nervous? Was it similar to the UK where you kind of shouldn't speak unless you're spoken to?
Well, there's a big joke in the Marine Corps. I was at an air wing, and air wings are joked that they're a little bit more laxed than some other bases. But my actual transition was very, very interesting. So I had asked to go to 29 Palms, which is also in California, but it's in the desert.
Uh-huh.
It's like probably the worst place to get stationed in the Marine Corps. But the reason I asked to go there was my brother was stationed there. And I'm very thankful God did not answer that prayer. um, because yes, that would have not been for me. But I got stationed in San Diego. So I was leaving North Carolina, and I actually had gone home for Christmas break, and they sent us home for, I want to say maybe about a week. And my class, our orders were messed up. So I still didn't know where I was going to get stationed. So I'm like, well, when I go back, I'm going to be back for like a couple of days, and then I'm going somewhere, anywhere. It could be Japan.
Okay.
So I packed everything that ever meant anything to me in my sea bag and my Christmas, all the things, because I'm like, I have no clue when I'll be able to come home again. And when I got back to North Carolina, I had actually had an empty sea bag. So when the airport had inspected my luggage, I had packed everything so tightly. When they went through my bag, they couldn't get it all in. So instead of, I don't know, calling me and saying, hey, we can't figure out how to close your bag, they just took the clip and put it on the shoulder strap instead of through the hook on the sea bag. So I'm waiting there for my bag, and sure enough, here comes this flat bag. It had like one shoe, one pair of pants, and a notebook. That was it. I lost everything.
No way.
And it was a rough start. It was literally New Year's Day, and I'm like, wow. And I am one of those people. I am a big New Year's Day lover. I love New Year's resolutions, anything that motivates people to be better people, better versions of themselves. Like, I love it. So here I am on New Year's Day, sitting in a hallway and writing out everything that I had owned to file my claim with the airlines. And I thought, okay, well, this sucks, but could be worse, right? So here we go. A few days later, I graduate my MOS school, and I'm flying from North Carolina to San Diego, and I get there and they've lost my bags.
Oh, no.
So now everything I had in North Carolina, like everything I had in Oklahoma to take to North Carolina, I lost. And then a couple days later, everything from North Carolina that I was taking to San Diego, I lost. So I sat there and thought, wow, I have literally lost everything. So luckily I did, what everyone recommends you to do is I travel with my uniform. So I had jeans, a hoodie, my laptop, and my uniform in sunny San Diego. And that's what I checked in with. And it gets better. I actually check in, and they assign me a temporary room until I can get to my unit and get assigned a permanent room. And as I unlock the door and open it up, there's two guys in there. And I thought,
no.
well, this room's full. Okay. So I go back to billeting and I say, hey, there's a couple dudes in the room. I think maybe you gave me the wrong room number. And they were full. So I guess there was a mix up, and they had no more rooms left. So they didn't know what to do with me. And I'm just kind of like, well, I've already lost everything. Like, what else is there? So I remember just being in such a great mental state at that time in my life.
Really strong, yeah.
They pulled a cot out and had me, I stayed the night in an auditorium in this cot in the middle of this big auditorium. So I woke up joking to myself that like, oh, I'm like a princess. Like, I'm in this big auditorium all by myself. And even the guys that were on duty were phenomenal. They went and bought me like one of everything for breakfast because they're like, we don't know what you'd like. And they just felt so bad for me. And I was like, this is great. Like, wow, you guys brought me breakfast and I have yogurt and a bagel and I have all these options. Like, this is so awesome. So it took another day before I got a permanent room. Well, actually, even then it wasn't a permanent room. It was a temporary room until they figured out what to do with me.
Right.
But it's just one of those times I think back to my life on how mentally secure I was to handle all that God was throwing at me. Because
yeah.
Let me tell you, there's days in my life had that happen that I would have not been as sane as I was then. So I had a really rough time getting to my duty station. But once I was there, once I got settled, there was about, I think, 10 of us that came from my MOS school that came to the same base, and we all eventually got stationed together. in the same unit. So once I got there and started getting settled and meeting people and going out and doing stuff, it was a blast. But it was definitely I'd say a rocky start, but because I was in such a good mental space, it didn't feel rocky. It just felt like, eh,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
something you deal with.
So if I'm working this out correctly, this is looking to be early 2008. Is that right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
around that time. And does that unit kind of like go anywhere? Do you go off and do training? Like we call them exercises where we'll head off and pretend we're away. Or do you actually deploy?
Yes. So both. My unit was actually deployed when I got to Miramar. So I ended up getting sent out on loan basically to another unit. And eventually I became a permanent part of that unit. So for people who are in my job field being administrative, that's not necessarily a very sought after or needed job on deployment. Normally you
Uh-huh.
can have a couple people do that job. You don't need like 10 people being an administrative clerk.
Yeah.
So eventually when I got settled into the unit I got kind of sent on loan to and just became a part of that unit, I actually never deployed. So my name came up 3 times for the same deployment, and there was always a different reason why the list got shuffled around and somebody else ended up going instead of me, and then that person got taken off and then somebody else got put on the list. So for Marines, it's something that's kind of bred into you. I want to say is that like you're a rifleman, like you're meant to deploy, like that's what you train for, that's what you do. So it's almost like this feeling of incompleteness in a sense. And I think talking to other Marines who have never deployed, we all kind of get that same feeling as it's like, I didn't deploy. That's how we say it. That's how we look at it, because there's almost like this part of our job and what we train for that was never finished.
Mm.
But I have a lot of really great dear friends who did deploy multiple times, and they'll tell me like, no, like you are lucky. Like trust me when I say that, like you're lucky that you didn't have to deploy. So it's interesting to have those two different mindsets,
Yeah.
because a lot of times when people ask me, there's always those questions they tell you, like, don't ask veterans, and then people do it anyway. Um, maybe I just have like a friendly face and they feel like they can ask me. I don't have like like I'm going to murder you for talking to me. But people are always curious. We're curious. We're human beings. That's what we are.
Yeah.
We're curious beings. So people always want to know like, oh, did you deploy?
Yeah.
Right. And when I tell people, no, I didn't, it's almost like I get like from them, like almost a sense of disappointment, or they're like, oh, like you're not a real Marine, or you didn't really serve then. So that's something that a lot of us who didn't deploy battle with, is the fact like I have to answer that question on a regular basis. In fact, I mean, we haven't even talked about how we met before, but when I was at Invictus, I was asked to do an interview. And I told them, I said, hey, you really need to make sure to tell these people up front that I didn't deploy. And they're like, oh, that won't be a problem. I'm like, I'm telling you, it is a problem. Like I deal with that a lot. So sure enough, they had told them, oh, hey, it's not a problem that she didn't deploy, right? And they wanted someone who had deployed. So it was even amazing for people who work alongside Marines and who help us during that time at Invictus to even realize like, oh, that's a thing for people. Well, yeah, people have this idea that if you served in the military, you deployed, right? So everyone's deployed, right? So if you didn't deploy, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you deploy?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing I battle with a lot. I once had somebody tell me, well, if people ask you, just say you don't want to talk about it, because you really don't want to talk about it. But something like this on this kind of platform, I think it is important to talk about. And I think it's important to address, is the fact that not all of us deployed. And that often sometimes is almost a traumatic experience. Like I said, every time being asked and then having to say, no, I didn't. And then getting that like, oh, like disappointed reaction from somebody is, it's almost hurtful, because it feels like the service that you did do was discredited upon. So,
I hear you. And you know, your country asks you to do a certain role, and that may not be deployment, but there's a lot of people out there that don't get that, don't understand that. But it's very similar to kind of me in regards to civilians will ask me, did you shoot someone? I'm like, no, I was kind of lucky not to in some way. But they would respond in the same way. Oh, okay. And I remember doing a talk at a school once about my time in Afghanistan and Invictus and stuff like that. And at the end, there was kind of Q&A, and this lad put his hand up, and he said to me, have you been in a firefight? And I said, well, actually, yeah, I've been trained as a fire marshal, and I have put out some fires. And he went, no, as in shooting bad guys. And I was like, oh, well, no, actually not. I've been mortared many times, but I haven't been shot at. And the disappointment on the kids' faces was quite hurtful to me, because just like what you said without not deploying, it seems to be if you deploy, then you must shoot someone. But again, it doesn't always end that way.
Yeah, I have a friend too. He deployed, and he same job as me, so administrative. And I was told by other people, I don't understand what's wrong with him. He never even had to leave the wire. And he dealt with a lot of internal struggles, and that's something that I think we've gotten better as a society to recognize and address as our mental well-being as well as our physical well-being, right? And he was never the same after he came back from deployment. So he had dealt with so much internal struggle for whatever reason. He had a deep internal struggle, but because so many people criticized him for saying, well, you shouldn't have a problem because you never even had to go outside the wire. You never even had to go on a convoy, or you were never shot at, like all these things. There was still something that happened to him while he was there that changed his mental state, that changed how he functioned. And it was really disappointing to see. At that time, it wasn't something that was talked about. It wasn't something that was advocated for. So to see how this Marine, this brother, was treated, and ultimately how he left the service is something I think back on. Is just, it's really sad. And I'm glad that we've grown a long ways from there, and we're starting to recognize that and do something about it. But I think as a society and as a culture, we're lagging. Again, that kind of goes back to we're curious beings, right? We want to know that. Every time I sit on a plane and every time I tell someone I served in the Marine Corps, it's always, oh, did you deploy? Did you ever have to kill someone? Yeah, it's all the curious questions that, I think are sometimes kind of bold for strangers to ask another stranger, but maybe it's easier to ask a complete stranger these bold questions than someone because it's almost like I'll never see them again, or I'll never have to talk to them again.
Yeah. And in fact, actually just signing up, actually putting your name forward to be selected to join any part of the military and go through the training and complete it is in itself an accomplishment. And a lot of people they forget that, right? And we need to remember that. And as you say, in regards to mental health, we're getting there. We've got a lot of work to do as a species, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So you mentioned earlier about you would go and do exercises or training and stuff like that as a unit. Do you have any stories from that you can remember that stand out for you?
Oh, man. So one thing that we kind of did this like Ironman kind of competition. And when I was in, there were not equal requirements for physical fitness for men and women. And that is something that I personally advocate for. Is I feel that there should be equal requirements, because I think that's one of the things that divide us as genders. And this is like a kind of soapbox thing. I guess I'm going to hop on here, but
do it. It's your episode.
I think that we as human beings are willing to accept the exceptions when they benefit us, but we don't like them to be pointed out when they don't benefit us. So, for example, when it comes time for promotions, we should all be promoted equally at the same pace. However, I shouldn't have to run as fast as you, or I shouldn't have to do pull-ups like you do. And that kind of mentality just blows my mind, is that, there was this big push here in America to open up all the MOSs for men and for women, and that it doesn't matter what gender you are, I can be a woman and still pull a trigger, right? However, we still maintain this separation of requirements. And I think that that's a key to where it starts, is if our physical fitness requirements are the same. And I've had this argument with many of guys before. They're like, oh, so we should lower our standards. Absolutely not. There are many, many women out there just like me who can do it, right? If we want to do it, we'll do it. And I think it's really unfair for people to make that kind of argument, in a sense of saying like, oh, we got to lower our standards for you, or you have to have separate standards than the men. No, we shouldn't have to, right? But this is one of those times where it really showed that. So within my unit, there was a very, very small group of us, and us being women, that I felt performed pretty close to the male standard, if not equal to the male standard. And this particular day really showed that. I was the only female in my section. So when it came time to working out and doing any PT exercise, I just did exactly what my counterparts did. And at the time, women were required to do a flexed arm hang for their test, and men were required to do pull-ups for their test in the Marine Corps. So when my sergeant told me and another guy, hey, you have to do 100 pull-ups by the end of the day, I did 100 pull-ups by the end of the day. I didn't do the flexed arm hang. So later in the day, when he asked me, he says, hey, so how long did you hang for? I said, you didn't ask me to hang. You asked me to do pull-ups. So I did pull-ups. And I think that mentality clearly showed this day where we were doing an Ironman, is women still just had to do the flexed arm hang. Men had to do the pull-ups. So you kind of maxed out, and who could stick around. Well, there was myself and another Marine who we were pulling ourselves up onto the pull-up bar. Now, I was short, so I did have to get like a pretty good boost to then pull myself up. But there was a lot of girls who had to be held all the way to where they were ready to hang. And I just thought like, man, in the end, we called it a draw, even though I, to this day, will say that she won, because she physically pulled herself up with no assist whatsoever every single time. But it was just the two of us that were doing that. Everybody else had to be pushed all the way up into position. And I thought, we don't have to do that. We don't need to do that. There's plenty of times where we can fight to the finish, and we can push ourselves to that max, push ourselves to that limit, and we stop ourselves. I know a woman that anytime we had to go on a big unit run, she would immediately go to medical and say that it was her time of the month and she was just in way too much pain and couldn't run. And she would get a chit that would get her out of the run. And she would later brag about how she lied to medical just to get out of the run. And that's some of the things that just really upset me about women tearing other women down, is that doesn't do anybody good. That doesn't do us justice as women serving. So I'm really thankful for that day, knowing that there were other women who weren't just, I'm just going to get up there and fall because I don't want to do this. And that there were other women like me who were willing to fight to be the best, to be better, to achieve more. And that I wasn't kind of alone in my service, because like I said, I was the only female in my section. So being the only female, sometimes I kind of forgot what it was like interacting with other females,
right,
or
yeah.
what maybe the female requirements were. And then
Yeah.
we'd come together and I'd say, oh, okay. Oh, well, I'm not too shabby because I'm doing the same things they're doing. While there was a lot of women who wanted to just do the bare minimum and take that exception, right? Like, oh, I don't have to do 60, then I'm not going to do 60. So that was some of the things I noticed a lot when we come together in PT, and just the differences in what the men and women's requirements were, but then what the performance. And I'm not saying that there weren't any men that would do the bare minimum either, because I had a good buddy who he could barely do the minimum pull-ups. He just couldn't.
Yeah.
So definitely don't want this to sound like a women bashing thing, but I want to just bring that point up, that there there are times that I can think back to how, no, there's women out there that we fight to be the best. We fight to outperform. And I don't want other women to give up or lose hope in that. If they're out there and they're listening to this and they're thinking like they are the one right now in their unit that is pushing to strive to meet those higher standards, like good on you. And that's what it should be. But if someone's listening to this and you're the woman who is taking the exceptions on, I want you to think of how much you are affecting the bigger picture and how every woman is affected by that decision. So that's like my soapbox.
Yeah. No, you're more than welcome. Like I say, it's your episode, so you can share what you want and go on any soapbox that you wish. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, and it's good to hear your perspective on it for sure. So you're very much into your fitness, as I'm guessing most Marines are, and it sounded like you always wanted to push yourself to be better. Yes,
definitely. I always had this, be the best mentality is strive for more, achieve more, do more, don't settle. And I still live my life like that.
Good. So this is me just being curious now. So if your unit went and did like a training exercise somewhere, is that area that you're stationed in able to cope with that, or would you have to go and fly somewhere in the US to go and do that training exercise?
So my base, since it was an air wing and it was pretty small, a lot of the trainings you would go to other places, especially depending on what kind of training. If it's like cold weather training, clearly we wouldn't be in San Diego. But just north of Miramar is another base, Camp Pendleton, and that's where a lot of training occurs because there's a lot more landscape there. And Miramar is like in the middle of San Diego, so there just isn't a lot of landscape. Not a lot of room. We did have a rifle range there. We're able to do some small exercises and small trainings and such, but we'd go to a bigger base that would have more landscape to be able to do and accommodate for those trainings.
Nice. Was you a good shot?
Yes, I anyone listening to this who went in boot camp with me would argue otherwise, but I had some vision problems where I would do the rapid fire test and all of my shots would be in the black, no big deal. But once I got to the 500-yard line, it seemed like I could not hit the black to save my life. So once I kind of addressed the fact that I just could not see, it was super blurry, 500 yards away.
Yeah.
So once I fixed that, then yeah, no problems.
So then you're all good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned joining in 2007 and finishing in 2011. So what's the kind of like last couple of years of your career? What does that look like? Do you just stay solely in California? Are you leaving out of your own accord? What's the kind of like ending part of your career looking like?
So I did stay at Miramar after all my initial training, I stayed in Miramar the rest of the time. I actually was on a medical board. So I served 4.5 years. I went past my EES, end of active service, or EOS, end of obligated service.
I'm going to jump in there. So does that mean you sign up for a 4-year period? Is that how it works?
Yes. Like that? Right. So most MOSs, so most jobs are 4 years. Depending on your job, you may have to go 5 years because some schools are longer. So I think maybe aircraft mechanic, and I'm not 100% sure my school was 3 months long. So, but there's some schools that you go to school for almost 8 months. So those are 5-year contracts, but 4 years is your kind of basic 4 years on active duty. And then you have 4 years of time where you can be called back to active duty, essentially. So I entered a med board within my last year. I got promoted and went on a med board on the same day. So I was on a med board for a little over a year.
Right. Okay. I'm going to ask a little bit more on the med board shortly, but you mentioned about promotion. So how does that look like in your part of the military? And and you said that you left as a corporal. So I'm guessing there's ranks between that, right?
Yes.
So yeah, do you want to talk about your promotion aspect?
So you start out as a private, and then you get promoted to PFC, which is private first class, and then you get promoted to lance corporal, and then I got to corporal, and then after that is sergeant, and then so forth. But yeah, so I was a private in boot camp. I got promoted during my combat school to PFC, so private first class. And then once I got to my duty station or into the fleet, I ended up getting promoted to lance corporal. So on the day of my med board, I got promoted from lance corporal to corporal. And that was the last promotion. So promotions depend on your job in the Marine Corps. So every branch is different. And the Marine Corps, you do not have to take a test necessarily to get promoted. There is an annual Marine Corps history and kind of Marine Corps knowledge type test that you take, and it's part of your score. So we call it the cutting score. It's comprised of different things. So what your PFT test is, what you shoot at the rifle range. Like I said, that little test, I'm wanting to say it was like 50 questions, or maybe it was worth 50 points. That's part of it. Your combat fitness test. So you have your PT test. There's two different types. There's a physical fitness test, and then there's a combat training test. So all those, and then you get your remarks. So your leadership basically scales you on 1 to 5, and you get points for how you're doing overall. All those things compile into a number, and then that number becomes your cutting score. So everyone gets their numbers, and the Marine Corps says, hey, I got 5 open seats for corporals, and then they look at the top 5 numbers, and that's where the cutting score is. So that's where the cutoff is. So those 5 people will then get promoted because there's 5 slots for them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it works in the Marine Corps. And I know for sure in the Navy and in the Air Force, you do have to take a job skills test. So you have to actually test for the knowledge of the job that you do, and that determines whether or not you get promoted.
Interesting. Yeah, sounds very, very similar to the UK. I can only really vouch for the Royal Engineers within the Army, but yeah, sounds very similar. The fitness aspect. So I'm guessing your testing aspect is annually, just like us.
So it was when I started the Marine Corps, you did your PFT twice a year, and then they came out with the CFT, so the combat fitness test. So you do the PFT in the spring and you do the CFT in the fall. At least that's how they started it when I was in it. Maybe a little different now. But the PFT is your basic fitness test, and that compiles of running 3 miles, doing pull-ups, which at the time when I was in, it was flex arm hang, and then doing crunches. So you have, is it 1 minute to do 100 crunches, and then you have to do a minimum of, I believe, 10 pull-ups. And then the run time, you have to run 3 miles, and I'm wanting to say it's under like 28 minutes. So
okay.
And then the CFT, you do an ammo can full of like concrete, and I think it weighs 45 pounds. So you do these ammo can lifts, and then you do everything in your boots and trousers for that one. You don't do it in regular PT gear. You do it in your boots and trousers, and you run 880 meters, and then you do like this little mini obstacle course type thing, and that's the CFT.
Interesting. So we've got a PFT as well. It's called something different now, I think, from the podcast that I've done that's coming out next month in December. Yeah, we're recording this in November, by the way, if anyone's doing maths. This is changed to an assessment because they had to change it due to mental kind of like aspect of test. Like people were getting kind of like scared of it. But ours is 1.5 miles in the Royal Engineers. And you have to run that under 10.5 minutes. If you're going to go to do become an army diver, that was 9 minutes. So that's more of like an elite aspect of within the engineers. You also had 2 minutes to do 50 sit-ups and 2 minutes to do 40 press-ups. So that's kind of like the standard. No pull-ups. No pull-ups, nothing like that. No crunches. And then the CFT is 8 miles with a Bergen on your back, carrying a weapon, helmet, and you had to do that in under 2 hours. So yeah, that was our kind of like annual test. So yeah.
I feel like that would be a much better test, not to dog the Marine Corps, but when the CFT first came out, I was actually at my MOS school. So my class was done with all their work. So they had us go outside and we did all these like really weird, crazy, random stuff. And basically what they did was they took our results to make the average results. And then they figured out from there and all the random things we did, like running an L. And so they took all those random things and then they made the CFT out of that and took our times and like averaged them out. So then once I got to my duty station, they were reintroducing the CFT and they made an actual CFT training team to kind of showcase for the commandant. And I was originally on that team. I got taken off because I wasn't supposed to be because of my medical restrictions.
Right.
But I was on that team. So I had to do it. It was like 2 to 3 times a week. We had to do it. And one part of it, you like low crawl, then you high crawl, and then you run in a zigzag, and then you pick up a weighted ball and you got to throw the weighted ball in like a circle, and then you buddy carry someone, or you have to drag them. That's what it is. You drag them like through the zigzag, and then you buddy carry them or fireman's carry them through the rest of the obstacle. And then you got to pick up the weighted ammo cans and then run back to the obstacle with the weighted ammo cans or something. So it was a lot of just really odd little things here and there. But everyone jokes like we didn't really feel like that, like running in a zigzag, like is that really going to mean I'm combat ready? Or low crawling for 10 feet, does that, so there was a lot of jokes, but I mean, people may not agree with this because it does sound difficult, 8 miles with your pack and everything. But I think that would be a much better test of, physical fitness, endurance that you have to have while on a deployment.
Yeah. So we call that a tab, where you walk really fast and then you'll jog some of it, and then you'll walk really fast and then you'll jog. Do you guys call those tabs as well?
I don't know if we have a term for that.
No?
Honestly. Yeah, if there is a term for it, I don't know what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I used to always, I wouldn't say dread going on them, because we might just go and do like a 4 mile. It wouldn't be the combat fitness test. It might just be a Friday fitness. And we just go out for 4 miles with the Bergen. But I always remembered when it ended and you took that weight off your back. Oh, it was great. And you really felt you accomplished something. So that was when I was fit. Brie can do that now.
Yeah. Now's a whole nother story on all of the things, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned being promoted at your medical board. I'm guessing this means that something happened to you or some medical issue happened?
Yes, I actually had a really weird kind of fluke thing happen with my right knee. And I just had issue after issue. And it seemed like every time I went to medical, it was like, oh, we can't find anything wrong, just stretch. Can't find anything wrong, just stretch. And it got to where you can only be on, and in the Marine Corps and Navy, so that's something too, is the Marine Corps, we don't have a medical field. So we actually rely on the Navy for all of our medical needs. So, I go to medical, and in the Marine Corps Navy, they call it a CHIT. So CHIT, a medical CHIT, basically saying like, hey, something's wrong. She can't run for 2 weeks, for a month, whatever. I know the Army calls it a medical profile. I'm not sure what they call it. Do you guys have anything like that? If you have a medical reason why you can't do stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, ours is a CHIT. I think we call it something like that. Yeah, I remember it's like a little green thing. It was a little green slip. But what did you say the Army's called it?
The Army calls it profile.
A profile. Yeah, we definitely don't call it that. I think it's It's nicknamed a sick note.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think CHIT probably stands for something. The first time I heard it, I thought it was SH, not CH.
Okay.
And I was like, the what? So yeah, I basically, you can only spend so much time getting these chits saying that you're just not medically okay to work out in PT. And you move up you get light duty. So this chit says that I'm on light duty. I can only do certain things. And then after a while, you have to go on limited duty, which is up to 6 months. So I went on a limited duty, finally got an MRI of my knee, and the film was actually exposed. So I had paid money to go get a second opinion, to have another doctor look at my knee, for him to say that this MRI is useless. The film was exposed. I'm like, what?
Wow.
What are you talking about? So that 6 months was kind of wasted in a sense, because at the time medical was just so backed up to get me in for the MRI, yada, yada. So I went on my second limited duty before I even saw a surgeon. Finally, I had saw a surgeon, and the surgeon said, hey, this is what's wrong. We'll do surgery. We'll fix it. Boom, boom, boom. No big deal. So I was scheduled for surgery, which was...
What did they say was wrong?
So I tore my plica, which is a part of the knee that most people don't even know exists. And I once was told to just tell people I tore my meniscus, because then people would understand it better.
Okay.
So if you're a medical doctor and you're listening to this and you're like, that is a horrible way to explain it, then I don't know. But basically I tore a piece of tissue, and when it tore, it knotted up. So I had this knotted up ball of tissue rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. So it ended up doing some bone and cartilage damage. And I did eventually have my surgery, which was an adventure in itself. My surgeon deployed. So this was 2010, when all the bad hurricanes had hit Haiti. And my surgeon was one of the top surgeons in all of the Navy. So he went to Haiti 2 days before my surgery date. Right. And when I got called, I was like, it's been 2.5 years of me dealing with this issue and us not knowing what it is. And I finally get somebody who knows what it is and is going to fix it. And you're telling me he's gone? So they ended up reassigning me another surgeon. My surgery only got bumped to the next week. And by that time, my second limited duty was expiring. So here it is, like a whole year, just fighting to figure out what is going on, which put a lot of wear and tear on my left hip. So I started having all these hip problems on top of the knee problems, which then, it's that, this is connected to that. This is connected to that. So next thing you know, I have issues in my lower back, and it just kind of became this snowballing thing where some freak accident, I tear my plica, and 2.5 years later, I get surgery. But by that point, I have so much structural damage that it was just hard to reverse. So I ended up on a medical evaluation board, and it was mostly for my knee and, the knee, the hip, the back, all the things at that point, while on a med board. So I was on a med board for about, it would have been 2 months. Yeah. About 2.5 months, I was on a med board, and I ended up in a really bad accident. So I was in a bad car wreck in which I had been rear-ended, and I ended up the seatbelt lock. When I came forward the first time, the seatbelt lock caught me and threw me back into the headrest, and I'm short. So the curvature in the headrest, my head actually hit the hard part. So I fractured a vertebrae in my neck. And then it threw me back forward. And at that time, my seatbelt lock had timed out. So I ended up hitting my head on the steering wheel and blacking out. From there, my injuries sustained from that was actually more disabling than all the other injuries I had. And that has been a road that I have battled ever since that day. I actually had gone to the hospital to get evaluated, and I did not receive the care that I needed. I'll put it that way, because I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to talk badly about the Marine Corps or the Navy, but people aren't perfect, right? People make mistakes. People aren't in the job field that they're meant to be in. I will say that. So I got a lot of, oh yeah, you're just going to be sore, suck it up. So after months, I was told, yeah, it's normal to have this much pain a few weeks after the car wreck. And I'm like, we're going on months, like something is wrong, something is wrong. So it actually was, I want to say 3 years after that point when I was diagnosed and it was determined that I had broke my vertebrae in my neck.
Wow.
I had
So you
fractured
were
it.
living, wow, you were living with a fractured neck for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Wow.
since that, like I've worn out a disc in my neck, all kinds of problems. But with that came the lovely TBI, which a lot of people talk about, which is another thing when we talk about, stigma and the fact of not deploying. And now here I am. I have a TBI from a car wreck where I sought medical help and I wasn't getting what I needed. So then living with that.
Could you just explain TBI for people, please?
Oh, yes. TBI, traumatic brain injury. So because I hit the back of my head and hit the front of my head, I actually had damage to both the front and the back of my brain. So I remember what it was like walking into work after that. It was a couple days after the accident. I walked into work and I couldn't even interact with people. Like people walking up to me, I would hyperventilate and it would feel like the wind had been taken out of me. And I remember it was difficult to write my own name out. It was difficult to tie my shoes, all the things that we know now. And we do a lot better job now than we did at that time on recognizing and treating for those kinds of injuries. So that was something I'll never forget that experience in my life either, where every morning my mom was calling me. So my mom was still in Oklahoma and she would call me every morning to talk me through waking up, like, okay, sit up. Okay, now you're going to turn, put your feet out of the bed. Okay, you're going to walk into the bathroom, right? Like the simple stuff, I felt like I was just in a daze or in a haze, like not knowing how to function, Thank God I wore the same thing to work every day, right? It was easy to pick out my clothes because I probably would have looked like a huge hot mess if I had to pick out my own clothes. So since I was already on a med board, that experience obviously kind of escalated my need, in a sense, to get out of the Marine Corps, that I was no longer going to be able to be fit in a manner that would allow me to deploy and be a contributing member to that deployment team. So I ended up being medically discharged. So there is a difference between medical discharge and medical retirement. Medical retirement for the US is if you get a certain percentage on your medical review board. And when I was going through, I was one of the first on this DES system. So it was disability evaluation system. It was something new they were doing where instead of the branch of service evaluating you and determining your percentage, you went out through the VA. So the VA actually did all of your claims, and the Veterans Affairs would do the evaluation. They would assign you a percentage, and then that would come back to your branch of service. And then your branch of service, they had the determining factor of whether or not they were going to keep you or they were going to medically separate you or retire you. So if your percentage came back at 30% or higher, you would be retired. But if you were less than 30%, you would be discharged. So my initial reason I went on a med board was for my knee, in which I received 10% for my knee. The combination of all of my other injuries that made me unfit to serve or unfit to continue to serve, I was over the 30% threshold, but due to a complicated story, and I was not granted the retirement. I was just medically separated. So basically I woke up one morning and realized that was my last day in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And it was pretty abrupt. There was some calculation errors, and I basically had 1 week to do all my outboarding process and leave the Marine Corps.
Wow. One week's notice. That's a very short period of time.
Yeah, very, very short time for sure.
Okay. Wow. You just bombarded me with a lot of information there. And Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really crazy with what you've gone through, but also a really insight into how the US military kind of like either retire or you said medically separate. Is that the term, or is it medical discharge that's the term used?
So a medical discharge, medical separation
Right.
is the same. So that means the same versus medical retirement.
Okay.
The medical retirement is where you'll continue to receive your medical benefits through the military's healthcare system, as well as the
Ah,
VA. If you're medically separated, then you only have the VA. Other things that you get if you medically retire, like you'll continue to have base access. So you can still shop
really?
at the commissary and PX, those kind of things, which that's
Wow.
slowly changing here for veterans in general can shop at our post exchange or base exchange. It's the same thing. It's just called different because the different branches.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Okay. That's incredible. So, one, you mentioned the PX there. Like us Brits get really excited whenever we go to a PX, US PX. We don't have that in the UK, so it's awesome. But we also don't have two options when you're medically leaving the military. We just have medical discharge.
mm,
And I always thought that was just the terminology used in the UK, and the medical retirement was the terminology used in the US. So learning those
mm,
differences is quite incredible, because when we get medically discharged, that's it. There's no MOD support. There's no, which is Ministry
wow.
of Defense. We're not allowed on the camps. We're not allowed physiotherapy. We're not allowed anything from the military. So when we
Mm,
get discharged, they literally say, "Thank you very much, goodbye." We also go through a percentage aspect. So when I was discharged, I was given 20% disability. And that took me a while to get used to having, I don't know, like a number of disability, which will
mm,
deteriorate in time. And I suppose the good thing with that is they've left it open so that I can be reviewed again in the future when I feel I've deteriorated enough to maybe have a higher percentage of disability. But yeah, to hear that you guys, if you're medically retired, still get that support, that's awesome. I always knew the US looked after their military much better, or their veterans much better than the UK. This just proves it, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's something that I didn't think about either on what does that look like once you're out, because once you're out here, we have the VA, but you can use the VA, but you'll have a copay if you're not at a certain percentage. So your percentage determines what other benefits that you get. And then each state here is actually different too. Some states, if you're and I'm not even 100% sure my own state, but once you're a certain percentage, you pay less to register your vehicle every year. Or once you're a certain percentage, you no longer have to pay sales tax. Or you get into parks and museums for free. There's different stuff like that. So there are some, I guess you could say, like extra things that you get when you're out. But yeah, that is true. Our two different retire or not retirement, our two different medical types of discharges. So whether it's just a regular discharge, separation, or retirement, you get different things.
Mm.
And
And it's just,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's I've always thought that the US definitely looks after their veterans better than the UK. Um, we're slowly getting better in the UK, but that's only from charities here doing the work. There is no, and actually that's a slight lie, because the Parliament's just passed something which is meant to be getting us things like veteran IDs, which we've never had before. So if you left
Oh
the
wow.
military, you wouldn't get an ID. Um, and some places are starting to do discounts on things now. So we're getting there, but we're nowhere near what the US kind of feel and look towards their service members or being veterans.
Mm.
I remember being somewhere in the US, I forget where, and there was veterans parking. So if you're a veteran and you had, I think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, could be different state to state, but you also have veteran written on the number plate of your car, and then you can go and park there, so you don't have to walk as far or something.
Yeah, they do. So in my state, in Oklahoma, you can register and get the actual disabled veteran plate. So it says DV and it has like a Department of Veterans Affairs seal on it, that kind of thing. And yeah, a lot of stores. That's one thing about America. I think that we do still have a large population who are very patriotic and very loving and caring to those of us who served. And there's always that argument like, well, you signed up for it. Yeah, I signed up for it. But no matter how old you are, when you sign up, you really have no true understanding of what you're signing up for until it happens. And even then, you're like, I didn't sign up for this, or I had no expectation of this thing happening to me because of my service, So yeah, there's like our hardware store has veteran parking, just to, say thanks. And some places, if you've received certain honors or awards like Purple Heart, there's parking specifically for those kind of awards and honors. Is if you're a Purple Heart recipient, you can park here. And a lot of that just, it's up to the business. If they want to put the sign out, they can put the sign out in the parking lot. And I think it's really cool because sometimes it's the little things that remind you, like there's faith in humanity in a sense. Like there's the little things, the little thank yous for your service, that it's somebody's way of being able to do their part and give back. So it is nice to see a lot of that here for sure. And I don't think I've ever thought that it was like that in other countries. I feel like that's something that, I mean, we've even talked about that at Invictus and talking to the different countries on how America is so like pro-America, America flag, and all the things that not a lot of other countries are that adamant on, making sure that American flag is on everything or.
Yeah. And you mentioned about some people say, well, you signed up for the military. But the thing is, we did sign up, we did volunteer, because whether that's to protect our, in my case, Queen and country, or for you following the family footsteps, that kind of stuff. But in doing that and serving the country in whatever way it is, whether that is deploying, whether that is back in the actual country that you're in, is to allow people to have that freedom, to have that kind of, I'm going to go down to Starbucks. Without that kind of like fighting for the country type thing overseas, we forget that. We forget that is keeping us free to have those first world kind of like perks, right? And we do forget that. We forget that even in the UK. I was saying this to someone the other day, that we drive on these roads. They're really nicely paved, and they're really nice to drive on. But people take that for granted. Like there's so many countries overseas that don't even have that. They just have dirt roads, and people sometimes get too, I don't know. They just forget. They just forget that we're in a first world, really, really good country, and take it for granted sometimes.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that that's something that's universal, no matter where you live. Is that we could focus a lot more on gratitude, because it would do not only ourselves and our own health some good, but it would just do the world some good too, because a lot of times people get so wrapped up and focused in the little things, and you're thinking like, no, I'm not saying that there wasn't a time that I wasn't mad about this, but I could be really upset and I could be dwelling and focused on the fact that I have been locked out of Facebook for like 3 months now, right? The big thing that just upsets me is like, I, if I don't have access to my stuff, I want to delete my stuff because it's my stuff, but at the same time, it's like, people take that for granted, that you have readily available access. I have friends all over the world that now I'm having to find other means to reach out to them, to get like their emails, to get their phone numbers, to stay connected, because now we've gotten something like Facebook that, it's so easy. It's this nice tool to stay connected, but we take that for granted. Mm-hmm. And we take a lot of things for granted every day, and really just looking at that in that perspective, and having that gratitude focus, right? Again, just doing our own health a world of of, of health,
Yeah.
but just for the world in general, like it would be a better place if people could be a little bit more grateful for the little things.
Yeah, exactly. So let's come back to yourself with your military time. So you're on the medical board. They give you a week's notice to leave, and then where'd you go? What's the kind of next steps for Jessica Rose?
So I actually had like plan A, B, C, D, and maybe even an E,
Okay.
on what I was going to do. And I was going to stay in California, and I was going to move in with this person and rent a room from them. And I was going to go to school here and yada, yada, yada. I had all of the things planned out. And slowly but slowly, every single part of every single plan I made fell apart. To the point where I ended up sleeping in my car for a couple nights. So, and I'll say this, it's not necessarily like, I want to say like I didn't have options. I had stayed with my best friend at the time, and she was actually pregnant and getting together, like moving in together with the baby's father. So they were going to get married and start a life together. And I'm like, oh, this is not like, hey guys,
Yeah.
I'm moving in with you. So that was just, it wasn't really a good fit. I had stayed with another friend, and him and I got into a really bad argument. And I was like, you know what, if you think this way, if you feel this way, we're not friends. I'm not going to stay here, whatever. So I left, and I could have paid for a room in a hotel. I could have paid for a room on base to stay, that kind of thing. But and my mindset is I no longer have a paycheck, because part of my plan was to do this particular job, and to do that job, you had to be going into school, and all these different parts. Like once one piece kind of crumbled, it affected other parts of the plan. So I told myself, like, I'm not going to spend money. So instead of paying to stay the night in a hotel, I had went on base, and I parked in the officers' housing area in the park under a light, because I felt like that was probably the safest place I could potentially think of in all of the world for me to be. And I put up my little like sun visor, and just climbed in the back seat and slept, and was like, okay, what am I going to do? Cool. I could still go to the gym, and I could take a shower there, those kind of things. But what's my next step? What's my next plan? And again, just piece after piece after piece just kept falling apart, until I had to really look in and realize that this isn't working. And I think I need to go home. So I had called my parents and was like, hey, guess what? I guess I'm coming home. And of course they're like, yay, we're so excited. And I'm like, yay, I feel like a failure. So this is great. Well, they came out to California, and we did kind of this like epic road trip back. And the whole time I was like already struggling, right? Like with, wow, like I'm not a Marine anymore. What am I? What do I do? All of my plans have completely fallen apart. I have nothing. And I'm going back to a state where there is nothing. It was more of a cultural shock coming back to Oklahoma than leaving Oklahoma, because there's so many things to do in California. Drive an hour and I could be in a whole nother spot of California. And in Oklahoma, it's like drive an hour and you're in a different state. Not quite, but so I came back to Oklahoma, and I stayed with my parents. And literally, my mom had the bucket of cheesy poofs, like the big buckets of the little cheesy poof bowls. And
I'm just going to jump in there and say no, because we're in the UK and everything's small over here.
yeah, it was like the ginormous size, ridiculous. But like Cheetos, like Cheeto balls.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it was. So if you've ever seen South Park, like I was Cartman eating the cheesy puffs. And I had bought Grey's Anatomy. Have you ever seen that show?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm up to like 14th season or something.
So I had like seasons 1 through 6 on DVD, and I would jokingly, because Oklahoma is 2 hours ahead of San Diego, I would say, oh, like I'd wake up at like 10 or 11 because really it's 2 hours ahead of time, right? So I'd wake up and my mom would be at work and I'd get this big old bucket of cheesy puffs and I'd sit on the couch crying my eyes out to Grey's Anatomy, eating these cheesy puffs. And then my parents would come home and we'd have dinner, and oh, here it's 8 o'clock, it's time for bed, even though, the whole 2 hours ahead of time thing. I didn't use that at nighttime.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, time for bed. Then I'd go back to sleep, and I did that for a good solid week, at least. I want to say 2 weeks, but it was at least a good solid week. So I'd actually, I'll kind of back up a little bit. I had gotten out of the Marine Corps on October 30th, so Halloween, and I was back in Oklahoma by Thanksgiving. So it was about a month's time span from when I got out to when I got back home. So you're also dealing with cold weather in Oklahoma, which I am not accustomed to anymore. And, the holidays, the hustle and bustle, everybody busy kind of thing. So all of that tying into this. Well, there was one particular night, and I'm sure my dad, like, anytime he hears me say this, probably like cringes and wants to like tell me to never tell people, but he just knew exactly what I needed in that moment. So we're sitting at the dinner table and we're eating, and I'm just like mindlessly eating, like my life sucks, my world sucks, I suck, like those kind of thoughts, right? And my dad, so he always called me Rosebud. I went by Rose for most of my life. And he looked at me and he said, Rosebud, you're getting fat. And I remember like sitting up and thinking, oh my God, you're right. You were right. I am sitting on my butt, eating cheesy puffs, crying all day. I got to get my life together. So the next day, my dad took off work and went with me for me to go get enrolled in school. And it was just really that wake up call that I needed. He was like, he spoke to my soul, where I was like, oh my gosh. So, it was one of the probably hardest things for my dad to say, but the most loving acts my dad has ever done for me was just giving me that, like, that internal wake up, like, oh my God, okay, get your life together. Let's do this. And then from there, it was just like picking back up the pieces and figuring out what exactly does my puzzle look like now, right? Because I went from joining the Marine Corps to be something my parents could always be proud of, something that I could always be proud of, to now I'm not a Marine. Like, what am I? You have this sense of pride where no matter where you go, people are like, oh, what do you do? Right? That's how we meet people. What do you do for a living? Right? Not who are you? Right? It's what do you do? And we put all this value in what people do with their lives or do for money into a person's worth, that if I said, oh, I'm a Marine, oh, instantly, like, awesome, like, wow, she's serving her country, like, oh, great, right? But then I'm not a Marine anymore, and now I have to go through this, like, what am I? When people ask me that question, so what do you do? It's like, I don't know. Like, I was in the Marine Corps, but what am I now? So really finding that, that, like, what are you? What is it about me to be proud of now? What is that thing that I want to tell people that puts value and worth on my life?
Yeah, that next title. Like, what is that next title?
Yeah. So it really took many years for me to kind of find what that is for me. But in the short version, I got enrolled in school. I started working at the VA office there. I joined the Veterans Organization, and I just kind of kept pushing. I got my master's degree. So I have a master's in crime intelligence analysis and religion and cultural studies. I always joke now that means I love research and I love people. So it goes really great with what I'm doing now. I'm actually an advocate for brain health and our service member veteran families population. So I've done a bit work with the homeless population and suicide prevention, drug overdose prevention. And that's just kind of what I do now. And I get to do it on a national scale. And I'm stoked about that. And I feel like it really is a true passion. It just fell into my lap. but that is my thing now, right? That I get to tell people like, oh, I do suicide prevention,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay. But I still would really like to change how, and I don't know if it's like this in the UK, but I really like to change how we interact with people and how we put that such value on someone's worth on what they do.
Hmm.
Um, it'd be nice to, instead of saying like, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, well, who are you? Tell me about yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think that,
I think it's a human thing. I don't think
yeah,
it's a US or anything, because it definitely happens in the UK. You're absolutely right. And sometimes you feel a bit hesitant on what to say and what to share, right? But yeah, go on. What more was you going to say?
yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. It's a human thing, right? It's sometimes there's so much power in language, right? And I know there's a lot of people who joke about be like, have tough skin, but at the same time, language is so powerful that we could really, if we could evolve our language to build people up rather than bring people down. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we can address for our mental well-being, for our brain health, right? And for everyone around us is really changing that conversation and saying, hey, tell me about yourself, rather than, so what do you do?
Yeah,
Because then
yeah,
what do you do? You're putting value in what someone does for money. And oftentimes people are working to provide for their families, not necessarily working for the joy of it. And I'm very blessed right now that I get to do both. I get to work to provide for my family, but I also get to work because I really truly enjoy it. Um, so that's definitely something I'm blessed with now, and I've come a long way
yeah.
from being that 18-year-old, you know, uh, low crawling through the dirt in the Marine Corps, to being that 20-something-year-old eating cheesy poofs on the couch crying to Grey's Anatomy. It's part of my life and it's part of my story. And I know everybody else has their own story and their own version of the story. And to, really just consider that we all come from somewhere, and to remember that. I think that's one of the best lessons that I've developed, in a sense, especially leadership wise, is always remembering where I came from, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you can get so far in your life that you forget how hard it was to be that 18-year-old with a fever crawling through the dirt, or that 20-year-old, who's lost everything, crying to Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's really important that our past forms us to who we are, but it isn't who we are, if that makes sense. I think that that's something that we're so quick to judge people for things they did 5, 10, 20 years ago, that, we all mess up. We all have our crappy stories, right? We all have our down days, but what do we do with those? How do we turn them around, and how do we create a better life, or a better version of ourselves from those experiences?
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and also well done for achieving all of those amazing things. By well, we're in the end of 2020 now, and you're still doing so much for everybody there. So yeah, incredible to hear. I just wanted to touch on you a bit more. Like, how are you? How's your journey been with your injuries? Because you mentioned quite a lot of separate things there. Yeah, could you share anything there?
Yeah, so that's been a fun ride. Um, I've actually now had, was it, I think, 9 total surgeries. So I had 2 this year alone. I had a another knee surgery last year. Oh my goodness, it's almost been 2 years now, come to think of it. But I had a major knee surgery that was basically because of all the stress and issues from my first injury. It kind of shifted the structure of my knee. So I had a surgery that was going to realign my kneecap, and with hopes that I would not have to have a knee replacement. So when you and I met, I competing in Invictus. I did 7 different sports. I absolutely loved it. I really found running was my biggest antidepressant. I got to the point in my daily life where if I was stressed, if I was overwhelmed, I would literally just stop everything I was doing, go put on gym clothes, go run until that feeling went away, and then I could conquer the world. Unfortunately, the surgery that I had last year will most likely keep me from ever running ever again. So that is something hard to swallow on a daily basis. I really had formed my life, and Invictus really changed my life because at the time, I never thought I could run because of my hip, because of my knee, because of my back, all the things, all the excuses we give ourselves and we give other people. Right. And I was able to do it. I was able to find ways to do it. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. But unfortunately, my surgery did not go well. I can't go into a whole lot of details right now as to that. But I have now since had to have more surgeries, which some have helped, some have not. But essentially, my quad is dead. So I'm not able to contract a lot of the muscles in my right leg anymore to be able to run or lift it. There's a lot of just like daily life stuff that you don't realize all the muscles you need to actually achieve said things.
Yeah.
And I did finally have surgery on my hip, which the hip surgery has gone well. I'm
Good.
pretty satisfied with that recovery. So, like I said, I had 2 surgeries this year, back to back. They were 2 weeks apart.
Yeah, that's insane, by the way, just saying that. Like how you can, I struggled with one hip operation. You having to deal with both at the same time. Hats off to you.
Yeah, 2020, man, 2020. It's been a year for all of us. And there's not one person I've talked to that hasn't been affected in some form or fashion with just heavy life stuff in general, right? Not just COVID and the pandemic, just life, deaths in family, illnesses, all the things, right? So we were definitely experiencing our fair share of many of those. So unfortunately, I'm not able to do half the sports that I did originally in Invictus. And I have to do a whole lot more modifications when I just work out in general. So I do still absolutely love fitness. Fitness is still my biggest antidepressant. It's just finding out different ways to do it, finding out ways to be able to push myself to my max to get that release that I was getting with running. Yeah. So I still cycle. I absolutely love cycling. And it's been a little difficult this year because the whole clipping out and clipping in.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's been tricky because my knee and my hip.
Yeah.
And I also have found a kind of a new recent workout love, I guess. I do the bar workouts. So I go to a Pure Barre studio and I do kind of like the ballet workouts. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or seen them.
Is it called bar? BARRE?
Yes, yeah. Yes.
I know some things.
So that's really nice, and it's helpful because it works on like little tiny movements, like little inch by little inch, and it helps strengthen all the muscles that I can contract. I'm still having to do a lot of modifications, which who knows, that could just be my life. And that's something that it's hard to accept when ill circumstances come our way, right? It's hard to take that pill and swallow it and really say, this is my life now. This is who I am now. What am I going to do with the cards that have been dealt to me? Then get into that woe is me. And I'm not saying I don't have those days, right? There are those days where I'm just like so overwhelmed. And I think, oh, if I could just run, if I could just go for a run, all this would be over with, right? But it's really fighting for what's best for me and how can I overcome that and what can I do now? What can I do that can help with the feelings of being overwhelmed, to help with the feelings of being stressed, that is not going to make me feel more overwhelmed and stressed.
Yeah. I hear you on that. And for yourself and potentially anybody else listening, you're going to find struggles. You're going to find that you might go and do something that you haven't done for many years and realize, I can't do this anymore. And for me, that happened a few years back when I tried to go go-karting. I hadn't go-karted for many years. I really enjoyed it. But after just the first race or the practice race, I was in so much pain because of that angle on my hip. And I realized
Oh,
I can't do that with my hips being the way they are. That's another thing I have to tick off the list that I can't do. And I was depressed. I was down for quite a while. But you have to learn to, like you say, accept it, understand what you can do, and focus on those areas.
yeah, and it's not easy. Like saying that from experience, it's that is the hardest but greatest step anyone can do is the moment you accept where you are, right? And know that no, I'm not that 20-year-old anymore, but I still have a life to live. I think that's something is that you have to find that life to live. Like for me, it's I joke, especially when I'm sick, I'll normally say stuff like, I'm just gonna roll over and die and then like I'll resurrect tomorrow and then I'll conquer the world. It's fine
Right.
because my mentality is that I have so much more to do in life. I have places I want to go, things I want to see, lives I want to touch. I'm very driven on achievement focused. So if something is overwhelming you, like those down days, right, where I just want to run and I can't, and I'm worked up because I physically can't do certain things that I used to be able to do, it's having to take that moment. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you do just cry it out, get it over with, and then think, what can I do? Because there's stuff I still want to do. There's stuff I still want to achieve. How can I do that? How can I push forward? Take your down day. Just don't allow yourself to be down all the time. And that's when like knowing yourself and being able to admit like I am feeling overwhelmed, naming it, I think is so powerful. Or I am depressed. I use those terms when I talk to people like my depression's flaring in because I want to be able to talk about it. I want other people to be able to talk about it too. And if you're able to name it and you're able to talk about it, you can address it, right? If I'm saying I'm super overwhelmed, a friend of mine can say, oh, what are you overwhelmed about? And we can talk about it and maybe that cures it. Or they can say, hey, I actually know somebody who can help with this particular situation. Let me connect you, because sometimes sometimes it's, we don't know how to ask for help because maybe we don't know what we need for help.
Yeah.
So just being able to express I'm overwhelmed or I'm feeling depressed gives other people the opportunity to talk those things out with us and offer help where maybe they have an expertise or they see someone else has an expertise that can help with the situation. We're
Yeah.
just being the ear to listen and understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good advice there. Nice advice. So during this chat, you mentioned Invictus Games, and this was after you'd left. So what does that journey look like with joining any sports after you left, and potentially Warrior Games and any kind of like sporting venues you ventured down to maybe assist you with battling your injuries?
So definitely the Marine Corps trials, Warrior Games, Invictus. My story there is kind of kind of a funny one. I feel like all my stories are funny in a sense. But so my husband is actually, he's a Navy veteran and he was medically retired from the Navy. He was at Walter Reed when they started the Warrior Games. So they were going around and they're like, hey man, we're doing this Warrior Games thing. Do you want to do it? And he's like, what? And they're like, we're going to do a bunch of sports and stuff. Come out to Colorado. I'm like, okay, whatever, kind of ordeal. So he ended up competing in the first Warrior Games. And I think was it the second or the third Warrior Games? Prince Harry had come out and said, hey, I want to check this out. And then from there, he took it international. So the way I describe it is that Warrior Games is the U.S. Paralympics for military and veterans. And Invictus is the International Military Paralympics. So here in the U.S., we compete for our branch of service. And when my husband he was going to the Warrior Games, invited me as a guest, I was like, this is so cool. I've never heard about this because it was just starting as I was leaving the military. So I go, and of course, I'm Team Navy because I'm there for, at the time, it was just my boyfriend. So, you know, I'm there for him. So I got to wear all this Team Navy, all the navy blue gear. And I'm looking at the Marines and the beautiful red. And I'm like, oh, I want to be there. I want to be there. So I asked a few people and was like, hey, how do I get into this? How do I get involved in this? How do I become part of this team? And they were kind of like, who are you? Like, you know, like, we don't know you kind of thing. So I was determined to wear red, and I called Headquarters Marine Corps and was like, hey, I'm trying to figure out who does the whole Warrior Games thing. And they transferred me to the lovely woman. And I said, hey, you know, I really want to do this. What do I do? And, oh, you know, you can apply to try out for the Marine Corps team. So, okay. So I did, and I got denied. And I was like,
oh no,
what? So I called her back and was like, hey, like, I didn't get a reason. I just got this email that was like, thanks, but no thanks. And she looked into it, and their big focus were people who were still in. So they're trying to catch people as they were transitioning to make that transition process better. And I told her, I said, look, can I volunteer? Can I do something, anything? Please do not make me wear blue again. Like, do not make me wear navy blue. So I think something I said maybe spoke to her, because she was like, okay, let me see what I can do. And next phone call I got from her was, hey, if we open up a spot, would you still want to compete? And I was like, yes, please. So I ended up getting flown out to California. And at the time I was in the mindset of, okay, what sports can I physically do with all of my injuries? Or I think a lot of us go through that stage. Really, any of us who have experienced an injury or illness, right? We go through this I can't because of phase. And I thought, okay, I can do cycling. I think I can do that. I don't think that'll be too hard, right? And then sitting volleyball. I love sitting volleyball, and my husband competed in it, so I definitely was like, yeah, I want to play sitting volleyball. I want to beat him. And then I thought archery, because I had a friend here locally who competes in the Paralympics, and he's an archer. And I was like, he can train me. He can let me borrow his equipment. Like, this is gonna be great. And then I get there and realize, like, I'm okay at archery, but it's not really my sport. And sitting volleyball was very competitive. Like, everybody wanted to be a part of sitting volleyball. So one of the coaches approached me and said, hey, you really want to play on the volleyball team, right? And I was like, yes, like, I do. This is like the one thing I want to do of anything else. He says, okay, well, in that case, you need to go run track. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen, because, you know, I got this knee thing, I got this hip thing, like, it's just not going to work out. And he was like, well, too bad. You're a female, and you need to be a valuable member for the team. So you need to be able to compete in individual sports as well. You can't just play sitting volleyball. That's not an option. So I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, and then after you go do track, you need to get on the field and go throw shot put and discus, which I didn't know the difference at that time. And then he said, then you're going to get in the pool and you're going to swim. And I'm like,
oh wow,
I have not swam since I was a kid. Like, when I was a kid, I did swimming lessons all the time. So I thought, this guy is crazy, but I'll do it. So at the time, the track for the Marine Corps trials had already been done and over with. But I found the track coach and said, hey, this other coach says I got to do this and that. And he says, okay, well, you know, do some warm-ups with this guy over here. He'll lead you through some warm-ups, and then I'll just have you run around the track a couple times, and I'll time you. So, okay. So up until that point, before I made it to the trials, I was focused on sitting volleyball and archery and cycling. So I go and I run my little, I think it was 2 laps, I'm wanting to say. And I get done, and I remember the coach asked me, how do you feel? And I'm like, oh, honestly, I feel like I didn't push myself enough. I feel like I probably could push harder, but I'm like, my knee doesn't hurt too bad. And I just really haven't been running. So it's kind of like building up all the excuses, right?
Yeah.
And he says, oh, really? I said, yeah. And he goes, huh, okay. I'm like, okay, so what was my time? Like, how'd I do? And he tells me my time, and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Like, I had no clue. So I immediately ran to my bag and got my phone out, and I text again my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, this is what I got, and this is how far I ran. And he texted me back, no, you didn't. And I was like, what? Like, is that good? Like, I don't even know. Like, is that a good time? Apparently it was a great time. And here I was talking about how like, oh, I did so terrible. I should have tried harder. I could do better, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I go to learn to throw shot put and disc. And I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. Like, I feel ridiculous. And they're just trying to get me through the basics so I can get out there and throw something and not look completely ridiculous. I actually did pretty decent. So,
Nice.
and then the pool, not so much. The pool, I struggled a bit. I got better. I struggled a whole lot more, those kind of things. So I ended up making the Marine Corps team for the Warrior Games that following year.
Nice.
And
What year was this? What year did you go down to do those trials for the first time?
so I did the trials. Let's see. So I did the trials spring of 2016, I'm wanting to say. And then I think it was June of 2016 now. Is that right? 16? That feels right.
Yeah.
Because then I think June 2016 was at West Point, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I did the trials and then I went to West Point and that's where we first met.
That's right.
And then at West Point, my husband also was competing for the Navy and that's when he proposed. So
yes, I remember that though. Yeah.
Yeah. So he proposed on the field during the track and field competitions. And since I might as well tell the story since we're on it. But so I had never competed in a track competition because, like I said, for the trials, they had already competed it. So I had no clue. They were literally teaching me how to use blocks that morning.
Oh, really?
And I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And my coach was like, you better do this. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. So I did pretty good practicing, but then the anxiety took over and I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fall on my face. So I ended up, the very first event was the 100 meters and I didn't use blocks and I ran and I actually won. I got gold and
Nice.
in my division. And I was just like, this is so exciting. So my husband, who again at the time was boyfriend, was walking me to and from all of my events. And I was just like, this is so great. This is so fun. Like, I've never done this before. And I never thought I could run again. And oh my goodness. So in between a couple of the races, I'm going to see medical because they're like putting some ribs back into place and, making their adjustments to keep me running. And about that time, some fellow Marines were like, they're calling you. And I thought, oh, shoot, I didn't stay in the holding bay. I'm going to be in trouble. And they're like, tell me to go to the 40-yard line. And to me, I'm like, there's 4 of them. Like, where do I go? And then I saw Andrew and they're like, oh, he'll get you there. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go up to him and I'm like, anxiety through the roof, right? And I'm just going off. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're going to start the race without me. They're going to be so mad I left the holding area. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the race. They said they were calling my name. And he's just looking more and more confused. I'm like, wait a second. Okay. They weren't calling my name. Everyone's messing with me right now. And finally, poor Andrew was like, okay. So then he pulled the ring out. And as he goes to get down, I saw the ring and I snatched it out of his hand and I said, yes. And I put it on my finger and then I fell on him. So I didn't even give him a chance to ask because as soon as I saw it, I was like, no going back, buddy. So of course that was like super fun. Like I got gold and a diamond all in one day.
Yeah.
So that was a great life-changing moment. Obviously, I got engaged and there was some other family stuff going on that was really tough for us during that time. My husband had lost his niece. So she was 13 days old. And we had lost her just a couple days prior to that, actually. So it was still really fresh and raw. We did get to meet her before she passed away. And it was literally, Andrew was already at West Point. He had to fly back. I drove down and then I flew out from Texas to go to West Point. So it was really, really soon and sudden. So we were going through a lot as a family. And it was just such an experience, all this light coming out of a dark time. So absolutely loved it. I competed in shot put and discus there as well, and I did cycling. I actually medaled in, I think, everything I competed in for Warrior Games, and I got picked up for Invictus the following year. So I did Invictus 2017 in Toronto, in which I competed for shock put discus. I did all the short and long track. I did cycling, and I did rowing. So I row here in Oklahoma. We actually have a veterans program with US Rowing. So I help run the program here in Oklahoma for veterans. So I competed in rowing as well. And then I did swimming. So there's a funny story there too. Why I don't say I competed in swimming. So in swimming, there was this big joke. They flew all of Team USA to New York, and we were doing like some publicity stuff, and all the team sports were getting to get together and train. And we had a lot of people drop. So they had extra swimsuits, and I had been swimming as cross training. So I had jokingly said, I'll swim if you give me one of those suits, because I just loved the swimsuit. And my two best friends at the time were all competing together. They tell their head coach, who actually is the coach that oversaw swimming, and he said, okay. And I thought, wait, what? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I've been swimming to cross train. I don't really know, like, if like I can really do this. Okay. So we got a place to let us use their pool while we're in New York. And a lot of people were helping me out, kind of correct my form and this and that. And we were in a 25-meter pool, and the Invictus pool was the 50-meter pool. So yeah. I was like, man, I don't really know how to do turns. They're like, oh, you won't have to worry about it there because it's 50 meters. So I'm like, okay, I was just kind of lifting myself up and pushing myself off, that kind of thing. And most of the people there were like, yeah, we think you're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. I was like, I don't know, man. I really think the coach should come down here and tell me I don't know what I'm doing. Because as much as I want that suit, I'm not really that confident. And sure enough, we get to Toronto, and we're signing in, and I'm like, am I really doing this? Am I not? Like, what's going on? And the night before swimming started, I got a call from my liaison saying, come downstairs to meet me. I have your captain swimsuit. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this. Okay. So I ended up, I did freestyle and breaststroke. I can't backstroke because of a shoulder injury, but when I was training to do freestyle at the Marine Corps trials, they were trying to get me to break, instead of like breaststroke where you come out and you push both your arms, to actually break with just the one arm for the freestyle. So when I actually did breaststroke, I ended up breaking with one arm and I got disqualified.
Oh, no.
So I was like, oh, bummer. Well, then I did the freestyle, and I didn't do too bad. I don't think I was last, but pretty close. And I thought, oh, I'm glad that's over, right? Like, man, woof. That was, I was competitive, and nowhere near as competitive as I needed to be, right? So the next day I get called and it says, you're signed up for the 100 free. And I was like, what? I was like, no, that's not a thing. But I felt so bad because here they gave me this swimsuit, and they signed me up, and they had the rosters changed so I could compete. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't do a flip turn.
Oh yeah.
Like, I've never in my life done a flip turn, or maybe as a kid, I don't remember. So we're there, and I'm standing there, and I'm like all nervous and anxious. Like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And I asked one of the judges, I said, hey, so I can't do the flip. Will I get disqualified if I use the ledge to pull up to push off? And they said, well, let's double check, but I don't think so. And they came back and said, no, as long as you don't physically get out, you're fine. I said, okay. okay, I can do this. I can do this. I got this. And the race, a few races right before too, I made a really awful joke. There was a guy who was struggling, and of course, like, you get the whole audience and the whole experience where everyone is chanting this guy's name and cheering him on because, gosh darn it, no matter what, he put himself out there, and he is probably doing the same thing as me and competing in way too many sports, So, good on him, like, cheer him till the end. And I jokingly say to the officer next to me, I said, that's going to be me. Just wait. So, what I didn't realize is it really was going to be me, and it was rough. So I'm swimming, and I get to the end, and I turn around, and as I pull myself up to turn around, I look, and everyone else is finishing.
Oh no!
And I'm like, huh? Like that instantly. Like, I just weighed like 50 pounds more, and I thought, okay, I just got to finish. So I'm going, and then I get this brilliant idea that it's freestyle, man. I'm way better at the breaststroke. So I start doing the breaststroke and realize I haven't been doing the breaststroke enough. My endurance is not there. I'm going to go back to freestyle. Right. So it was a hot mess. I was a total hot mess. But the coolest thing was, a really cool picture came from this too, is I had been competing with all these other women on the track and cycling and, rowing. So I really got to know all these other great women from all these other countries. So by the end of it, they were all in my lane, cheering me on, and one of them had even come to meet me and swim the rest of the way with me. And there's a picture where I literally am like dying at the end, and I got my arms around them, just like, I'm so glad this is over. So it was that moment where, like, I could have been completely embarrassed, especially because I straight up called myself out and was like, that's going to be me. Everyone's going to know my name in this auditorium, to where I was like, I was potentially going to drown in that pool. Like, what was I thinking? And to this day, my husband's still like, you should have just told them no. I didn't feel that was an option, Yeah. So it was a life experience, obviously with the pandemic and gyms being closed and pools being closed, I have not done a lot of swimming.
No.
But it is definitely something where I feel like I've gotten better at. And I even had coaches tell me, like, you weren't that bad. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. And I was like, I should not have been in that pool.
Well done. Well done for finishing it, for sure. And I had popped down for the finals, and I remember how big and intimidating that pool was. So, yeah, I can only imagine what you thought when you turned around and you saw everybody at the other end had finished, and everybody watching you probably.
Yes, I definitely was like, there was that moment where I was like, I could just get out and then I'll be disqualified and it'll all be over. You're right. It was super intimidating. When we went there for practice, I looked at it and was like, that's a really big pool. Like, that's really big. That's a big one. And there's so much, like, we never know what we do every day that changes other people's lives or inspires other people. So there was another athlete, and I won't say what country, but, like, I know you, I remember you, so this particular athlete's coach had come up to me and was like, I came out of the pool still laughing and smiling as much as I was breathing heavy. And he said, you know what, that meant so much to this other athlete because, I pointed out, you're like half her age and you put yourself out there and you did that. And, it was an inspiration for the other athlete to be able to see that, she was doing pretty good compared to me. Right. And she was twice my age. So it was cool to hear that. And, when the little banners were cut down, they cut them up into strips and they were throwing and passing them out. So the little banners that said Invictus on them. And this team collected one for me and gave it to me because they said, like, that was kind of like a token for the inspiration that I had shared with them. And I just thought, like, wow, I had no clue I was being inspiring. I was just trying not to drown, So it kind of goes as a reminder and to show you that, sometimes we put ourselves out there and we can make a complete fool of ourselves, but we have no clue how many lives that's touching and how many people we're inspiring by putting ourselves out there and, and trying, because sometimes that's all it takes. Just try. Someone's got to be last, right? And I am okay being the person that was last.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right with sharing, talking, a kindness, gesture of kindness that could touch somebody in a way that you never thought could. And just be yourself and keep going, and it'll all be good in the end, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely thankful and blessed. I mean, not only did I get engaged at Warrior Games and got to make really awesome friends like yourself, right? Just the experience of a lifetime of pushing myself and reminding myself that I can do more and I am more. So I may no longer be an active duty Marine, but that is part of me. And that's something that I have done and I have achieved, just like Invictus. You know, I medaled in track and long distance track, which actually there was an error on the roster and I wasn't on the roster for the long distance. And my coach was a Olympic short distance runner. So she's like, don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I really think I should do this. I really think I could do this. And she was like, long distance. It was not her thing, but I was like, no, I signed up for it. Like, I really want to do this. And she's like, you're crazy. And I ended up medaling.
What did you get?
So I got bronze.
You got bronze. Nice.
Yeah. So there was, I could have made it probably a lot closer for silver, but I also knew I had a race following right afterwards. Gold, I was not going to catch her. Like, she smoked us all.
Warrior Games, or was that Invictus?
That was Invictus.
That was Invictus as well, yeah.
Yeah, Invictus. That was actually my only Invictus medal was track. And now, I kind of look back to that and think, wow, I can't even run now. But it's something to look back of and remember, like, I was able to push myself that hard. I can still push myself that hard every day of my life, Have my low moments, sure, but then remember there's all these other moments. There's that corny phrase, you've survived 100% of your bad days, but it's true. And if we look to those bad days for inspiration on how we can continue to push forward, I let that kind of be my light on the bad days.
More great advice. You're pulling it out today. So I feel we've come pretty much to the end of the show, and I'd like you to take this opportunity to maybe share some knowledge, wisdom, or advice to anybody thinking of joining the military, be that in the US or be that in the UK.
I think the biggest thing, advice, like I said before, I would do it all over again. If I had every experience I had, I'd do it, even the bad ones, because it's really helped push me and shape me to who I am today. And I don't know many people who regret that decision, but it gives you the opportunity to do something for yourself while serving your country and being able to push yourself and learn a skill that maybe you didn't know beforehand. And something that you can always say, like, I served my country. I did my time in the Marine Corps and I'm proud of it. And that's something that no one can take away from me. They say that when you graduate boot camp, part of the ceremony for the Marine Corps is you get an EGA and they pierce it into your hand, that pin. And, that eagle is now encrusted in your blood. That eagle is now part of your heart, and no one can take that away from you. It is something that you did, something you fought for. And it's such an empowerable thing because you do it for yourself, you do it for your country, and you'll always be left with something that you can have a sense of honor with.
Great words. Now, before I ask you the next bit, can you just mention a bit more about that pin on your hand? They pin something in your hand?
So like the pins, like your ranks, we call it the EGA. It's the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. It's the Marine Corps symbol, right? So after you get done with the Crucible, the hardest part of boot camp, where, like no sleep, no food, you're doing all these physical activities, right? You're exhausted and you've reached that point like of physical and emotional exhaustion, right? And they come to you and they pierce that pin into your hand, and you close your hand up in it, and they say the magic words to you, like whatever it is at that moment. No one could ever say anything. And do I remember exactly what my drill instructor said? Nope. But I remember that it spoke to my heart, and I literally truly believe and feel that EGA piercing my skin, like that that experience is with me forever. I will always be a Marine. You know, no one can take that away from me. I fought hard for that. I put in the work for that. Yes, I had the guidance, and yes, I had the help, but I ultimately had to put in the time for that. So that's just, that's kind of the closing of our crucible. And your next step is formally becoming a Marine and graduating. So it's the big emotional part of the experience of boot camp, is that these 3 months, like, were worth it for this one moment.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. I don't think we have anything like that in the UK, so that's good to learn.
Who knows? It could have changed by now. I'm sure someone would probably complain, you know, potential health risk. I don't know, but it's definitely, it's worth it. So if it has changed, maybe it should change back.
And I think the next part, again, advice, knowledge, guidance that you can share for any veterans out there, or anybody that's just about to transition back to civilian life, again, anywhere around the world, really.
I think the big thing there is just, again, remembering where you come from. Remember how much you've fought through and how much you've come through this far, and focusing on the future. You know, especially, you're going to have bad days. It is going to suck. You're going to go through kind of an identity crisis where, who am I now? What do I do now? And just remember, you've overcome so much already in your life. And what is it that you're living for? What is it that you want to do? You know, there's still, like I said, so many places I want to see, so many things I want to do. You have to find that thirst for life, and just find the thing that drives you, that gives you passion, that gives you hope.
Cool. Awesome words. Thank you so much. Well, I think we've come to the end. How did you find that? How did you find that little chat?
Good. We talked a lot longer than I expected, but I'm a talkaholic, so
that's all good. You no doubt shared and helped somebody out there.
I hope so.
That's cool. Well, this is, as I said at the beginning, episode 9. And so I just want to remind people that I keep saying we, it's just me doing this. We're available on Instagram. So I'll be putting up some pictures of Jessica Rose, and a snippet of this probably on the Instagram, which is Military Veterans Podcast. Also on Twitter, which is Military Veterans Podcast, and the handle is MilVet Podcast. And also have the website as well, which, again, some more pictures of you will be up there, just to see a bit more of your time served and what you've done outside of it. And that's militaryveteranspodcast.com, or, which is really cool, I changed it to milvetpodcast.com, easier to type in. So I did that one as well. So either one, you'll get to the website and be able to listen to the episode there. So thank you so much for sharing everything there. That's been really, really cool to hear the difference between our countries, and also from all of your experiences that you've gone through. That's really cool to hear. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for allowing me some time to be able to share, and like we said earlier, share in a hopes that it helps somebody else out. Yeah,
most definitely, and fingers crossed. And also thank you for your time. I say this on a lot of episodes. It's precious. It's something that we do not have infinite amount of, and so thank you for spending the time with me to share your stories.
Yeah, often the one thing that we take for granted, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just being grateful for the time that we're given on this earth, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And lastly, thank you for your service.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for yours as well. I couldn't do it if it weren't for the ones before me, and we wouldn't still be a standing, safe country if it weren't for the ones after me.
That's it. And the US and the UK have been great allies for many years. So
yes, besties.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. This has been Military Veterans Podcast, out.